and I could see in his eyes, you know, you can see these guys who are murderers, they've got this death stare.
Did you ever meet anyone in prison that you thought was completely innocent, and what was their story?
You know, it's prison. You're a tiger amongst tigers. Everybody's dangerous.
What's the story, everybody? Pete here from Thairish Times. Hope you're doing well. So today is part 2 with Shani Krebs, who has spent 18 years in Thai prisons. Now, if you haven't seen part 1, you'll still be able to pick up the story here in part 2. Shani was sentenced to a very long, lengthy prison sentence in a Thai prison for drug smuggling. And today he's going to delve deeper into what was life like inside the different prisons that he was in. He's going to talk about the interactions he had with the most feared prisoner. He's also going to talk about the time he shared a cell with David McMillan. And if you don't know who David McMillan is, he was one of the foreigners that escaped from death row. I think he might have been the only foreigner to escape from death row in Thailand. Shani's also going to talk about the Thai general that he met inside and the Blue Diamond Affair, the general's connection to the Blue Diamond Affair. If you don't know what that is, it was a diplomatic incident between Thailand and Saudi Arabia. We've got a lot to cover in this one, folks. It's a long one. There are chapters down below as well, so you can skip through to specific parts. Hope you enjoy it. Let's get straight into it. Shani, thanks for coming on again. Part 1 was spectacular. We got a great response. So many people had lots of different questions, and I have some of the questions here that we can nail down today. Okay, so the first one is the Blue Diamond Affair. So I remember hearing about this story 10 years ago, and I couldn't believe it when I heard it. It's an interesting story. Can you just give us a bit of a background on what the Blue Diamond Affair was, and then go into how you ended up meeting someone that was involved in the whole Blue Diamond Affair?
Yeah, so apparently in 1989, a Thai worker in one of the princes in Saudi Arabia who worked for this prince and had access to the bedroom and landed up stealing about, I think it was 90 kilograms of jewels. And amongst them was the blue diamond, and apparently he hid it in like in the vacuum cleaner, inside the basket of the vacuum cleaner. Anyway, this guy then took it to Thailand, where he sold the jewels to this jeweler in Bangkok. Lieutenant General Chalo at the time caught this jeweler, recovered the jewels, and the jeweler was sentenced to prison. I think he got something like 7 years and was released after 5. And then the general's team flew the jewels back to Saudi Arabia. And on investigation, they discovered that half the jewels were fake and that the blue diamond was actually missing. There were rumors in Bangkok in some of the newspapers that government officials' wives were seen wearing similar diamonds and things that had gone missing from Saudi. Anyway, there was this Saudi businessman who was close to the royal family, to the Saudi royal family, who was sent to Bangkok and to investigate, and he went missing and presumed murdered. And just a year before that, there was another Saudi diplomat was murdered in Bangkok. And around the same time, there were 3 more Saudi diplomats murdered, and these cases were unsolved and apparently had, so to speak, had no connection to the jewels. But the Thai government didn't really resolve these murders. General Chalo then in 1995, was charged and convicted for ordering the murder of the jeweler's wife and son. So he had them taken out. And allegedly he was involved in in this whole scam. Anyway, his sentence was upheld by the Supreme Court. And then around the time that I was there, I think it was in October 2009, he was sentenced to death. And then he was moved from special prison to Bangkok. And that's when he came to my building. I think I did mention in the previous interview that he slept outside my cell and he tried to push his guys into my cell, and I had a confrontation with him and had to approach him and resolve the problem, and for him to understand also that this was a private cell and things work differently. You can't just, although he had all this power, I mean, some of the people thought I was crazy to approach him because he was a scary guy. I mean, he had huge respect. And as I mentioned in the first interview, from the minute he walked in, he inherited like an entourage of 20 bodyguards. But it turns out that his main bodyguard was a good friend of mine who was also like an assassin. So lucky we came to an agreement and we became like good friends. But you didn't cross the general. There was no ways you could cross him. And there were one or two guys who did, and they were taken out. So
Shani, was he a scapegoat? Because he's a general. I imagine he had some kind of power. And I know it was a diplomatic incident between Thailand and Saudi Arabia. I looked at it today. The stats on it, like up to it cost the Thai government up to like 200 billion
in loss of revenue, because Saudi clamped down on giving visas to Thai workers. And I think, I mean, over 200 or 300,000 they used to employ a year in Saudi Arabia, which dropped right down to like maybe 10,000 or something. They stopped visas completely. So definitely, look, I think he was involved at a high level, but he wasn't the only one. There were some other cops also involved. There were about 6 policemen. There was another lieutenant colonel, I think his name was Pansak or something. He also did about 10, 12 years, but then also got like a royal pardon and got out. So they all got out eventually, So somebody had to take the fall for this. And because he was the man who retrieved them, so it was already obvious and fingers were being pointed at him. And there was pressure from the Saudi government. But like I said, it wasn't resolved completely, and I don't know what happened to the Blue Diamond, because I think today it's in America somewhere in a museum. So it's got quite a history, that Blue Diamond. It's a 50-carat stone worth millions.
Did he pass away recently, or is he still alive?
I think he passed away last year, if I'm not mistaken. Last year, I read something on the internet that he had a heart failure or something. But he was released. I think he got a royal pardon from the king. So it was soon after me. I think I was released in 2012, and I think a couple of years after that, around 2015, he received a royal pardon. So also there, they must have made some deals, the same as the first policeman did. So that other lieutenant colonel did 10 years, but then he also, got out. So that's how they work at government level.
Yeah, and I saw 2 years ago, the Saudi government now, they restored full diplomatic relations with Thailand.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but I would imagine, so who knows? They must have maybe come up with some money or some jewels. I don't know.
Maybe,
but an interesting story. And actually a very powerful man and very clever, So he loved his soccer, but he had this air of authority about him. And guys were scared of him, I mean, he was a scary guy. And so even the guards, there were some guards who tried to stand up to him. And eventually he was moved out of my building, and they gave him a cell in the hospital to keep him out of trying to control things, Yeah, no, it was,
did he have like it when you say a cell? Did he have a fancy kind of a cell with aircon, or was he?
No, nothing like that. It was just like it was a cell at the hospital, like for prisoners who were brought from other prisons to have medical treatment at what's the name, and also some of the workers slept in these cells. But it was like in the garden, and there were like maybe 10 of them next to each other, but nothing fancy, I mean, he lived like the other prisoners did. Sorry.
David McMillan. the famous David McMillan. If you don't know who he is, David McMillan is well, he escaped from death row in Thailand, and he's done various interviews, wrote books about the whole experience. You shared a prison cell with him, or you met him inside. Can you tell us that story?
Yeah, so when I was thrown out of Bombard prison and moved to Lajau, there I was put in building 6, and there were a lot of foreigners. Amongst them was, we knew him as Daniel Westlake, so that was his name then, and he claimed to have been from Australia with his Australian accent and everything. So he was a very quiet sort of guy, and he struck me as a bit of a nerd, you know. So, but friendly and helpful. So he actually approached me to share a private cell that he was going to buy, which would have been only for 6 people. So I said, yeah, I'd love to, you know, but I said, I'm not sure what's happening with me, you know, if I'm going to get sentenced. I was hoping for a 25-year sentence, which would have meant I would have stayed on in Lajau in the cell. I think it cost me something like 6,000 baht. But I thought, you know what, let me get comfortable. If I don't, I'll be moved anyway. But if I did, then at least I'd be comfortable. So I shared that cell with him. And Daniel was like very organized from when I got there. He had like a little corner behind the dining room, and he was like quite friendly with the lady boys. And so I think he had planned this long ago, because, and then I'd actually discovered later on that he had escaped from an Italian prison, and he had like 8 passports. So I think he was like quite a big dealer, you know. So he had contacts on the outside, which made it easier for him to escape. I often wondered afterwards when I was in Bangkok, if I hadn't have been moved, would I have escaped with him and become a fugitive, you know? So actually, I'm pleased I didn't, because I don't know. Well, anyway, I mean, great respect for the man. He pulled off something which would be impossible.
Was it
So
that same cell that you were in with him? That's the one he escaped
yeah,
from.
exactly that same cell. I believe, I don't know, rumor has it that he drugged the guys, that they all slept and sawed through the bars. But um, I think they just took sleeping tablets or whatever, because otherwise they would have been involved in assisting him to escape. And that can carry like a 9 to 15-year sentence. But I don't think he would have survived in Bangkok. So it was a desperate act, and very calculated and well planned. It was, I think, on Christmas or New Year or something, and apparently he had given guards money for alcohol, and they were having a big party, and in early hours of the morning he left. But yeah, huge respect. He pulled off something very daring. And afterwards, there was a big clampdown in all the prisons. I mean, there was an escape from my prison as well. There again, it was one of my mates, and he actually asked me if I wanted to escape with him, and I said no. I said, please, I don't want to know anything. Just what do you need from me? He said he just wanted like some nice clothing. So I gave him that, and then the one morning they escaped. There were 8 guys that escaped. He was finishing his sentence on a murder charge, about 14 years, and the police had now wanted to charge him with another murder, like a motorbike, you know, 2 of them on a motorbike, a drive-by shooting. And he said he's innocent, and there's no ways he's going to do another life sentence. So that's why he escaped. So in the time that I was there was an escape at Lajal, and there was an escape from what's the name, from Bangkok.
Were these
So
Thai guys or foreigners?
these were Thai guys. The one, I think also he had a bit, half his family was from Laos, but they caught all of them. Some they caught still going over the wall. A couple of days later, they caught a guy who'd been in the river hiding in the reeds. But this guy and I, we used to run every day. He would run for 2-3 hours. They bust him eventually. I think maybe 3-4 months down the line, on the border between Burma and Thailand. And at the time, I was actually in solitary confinement when they brought him in. And it was funny because he thought that I was in solitary because we were such good friends and I'd been charged for assisting him or something. And he fell on his hands and knees and he was saying, Katoti, Katot, I'm sorry. So I said, no, don't worry. This got nothing to do with you. This was my problem. So I think he got like an extra 9 years for that. I don't remember what happened, but also a great guy.
Where is he now, Shani?
I've got no idea. I've lost touch with most of the people that I knew, except a few of the bigger drug dealer type guys who I'm still in touch with them. But they've all changed their lives around and doing legitimate stuff. But yeah, so Daniel Westlake, David McMillan, yeah, I knew him well. Like I said, not a bad guy, friendly, helpful. But I would never imagine he could have pulled that off. And I actually used to think, sure, shame. This guy's going to have it tough when he comes to Bangkwan,
Another one that people have mentioned is Warren Fellows, who wrote the book Damage Done and served 12 years in Thai prisons.
Yeah, so while I was in Bangkwan, somebody sent me the book. I think Warren Fellows, I was arrested in 1994. I think he was released in 1990 or 1992. So I never actually met him. And he was in, I think, building 1. I was in building 2. But when I was reading his book, things couldn't have changed that much from if he was arrested in 80 something or 78 because he did 12 years.
Yeah, it was 78.
Yeah. So I don't know how much the prison could have changed. But when I read the book, it was like it wasn't the same prison. I think it was over dramatized. But also you must remember Warren Fellows was a junkie. So his everyday survival depended on him getting a fix. And those guys really had it tougher, with their addiction problem. But yeah, like I said, I just thinking when I read this, I thought, no, these aren't the conditions actually that we're living under. I mean, nobody was eating rats and stuff like that. So yeah, very, very different perspective. But then we all did our time differently. Some people do good time, some people do bad time. Like for me, it was important for me to stay away from the drugs, not get involved in the gambling and that, because that's hard. And then also we had guys there who were like beggars, they had no support from anyone. They used to lie around in the muck. They used to come around begging. So it was sad. So on some levels, yes, there's a lot of truth about Warren's story. But like I said, I think it was a little bit exaggerated, but all respect to him, he survived it, so don't want to say anything bad about the guy, but I just felt like this can't be the same prison. But things also changed, so things became more lenient, more foreigners being arrested. So like with the foreigners, the Thai authority was a lot more lenient and accommodating. Like one of the questions that came up, whether I was ever punished physically by the guards. So no, none of the foreigners really were. There were beatings all the time. Like if a Thai stole something and it was reported, they would bring him out, kick him around a bit. Or if there was a stabbing, they'd beat him first and then throw him into solitary. But this never happened with foreigners, so, and the main reason is because so many countries have embassies there and, it would be reported to the embassy, there'd be an investigation. So the worst thing they did to a foreigner is they would just move you from one building to another, or they would get one of the Thais to beat you or stab you. So, that does happen,
What was solitary confinement like? Was that, is it like a black hole and you're just shoved down a black hole, or what's it like in solitary confinement?
It's a one-room cell. You walk in through it's big bars from the roof from the ceiling to the floor, and then you've got like a window section that's also double barred. There's mosquito nettings. You walk in. It's about the length of my arms. From one wall to another, and from my head to my feet, and then there's no fan, there's no electricity, it's dingy, it's smelly. You've got a water tank behind you with a sunken-in toilet, and there's river water pumped in there. So yeah, it's not pleasant, and you've got no blankets. You sleep on a concrete floor, and you're locked up 24 hours. You're shackled. You've got chains, and every evening, when it was shower time in the cells, you could hear the chains clanging, because to clean your chains, you would sit in the section where the toilet was, and you would take a scrounger with some soap and put on your chains, and then you'd shake it on the floor. So the whole building used to rattle. It was an incredible sound. It was like almost like we were connected to each other through the noise of these chains. So it's like collective punishment, suffering together. And we took great pride in our chains, and they used to shine. And people would put these rings on them, these steel rings, and then they'd hook around your ankles. But when you walked, your rings would like make a dangling sound. It was almost like music. So sometimes you could identify who was coming, because guys had like more rings than the others. So we called it like our jewelry. They were like, mine was shining. I mean, I kept them clean all the time. Otherwise, they like cut into your ankles. It's rusty. So some of the guys had dirty chains. They didn't care, but it was also part of the psyche and the psychology, of solitary, and of this punishment. I mean, it's a harsh punishment, but it has to be, because you can imagine you're in a maximum security prison. You're with the most dangerous guys, and stabbings are everyday occurrences. So a lot of guys actually enjoy the solitary. For me personally, I did enjoy it. I had privacy. I was away from the general population. It was a very important phase for me. I'd also given up drugs already a few years, so things were becoming clear. And I actually managed to smuggle in a little pad with watercolor, and I started painting in color. So it was an important phase. And I also mentioned in the last interview that I wanted to go to solitary for the simple reason that I was planning to write a book, and you can't write about something that you haven't experienced. So tough, but it's like you go to the army, you got to do the army, that's part of the process. But some of the guys really struggled. I enjoyed the isolation, because my philosophy was that people would ask me, what, wasn't it lonely? So I would say no, because you only it's not about being alone, but it's how you spend time with yourself. So again, there I had a structure. I would wake up early in the morning. I would do my rituals in the bathroom, in the shower area, and then I would pray. I would do my exercise. Then I would write letters. I would read. So I kept my mind occupied.
Yeah. Shani, when you mentioned there you're wearing chains, I'd imagine obviously the chains restrict your movement. Were the chains ever taken off anytime, for exercise or when you were sleeping, or did you have to wear them all the time? And if you were wearing them all the time, I'd imagine it would kind of deteriorate the muscles on your legs. You wouldn't be able to stretch out your legs.
Yeah, so the thing is that you got rings around your ankles, and it's a long chain, about, I don't know, maybe that long, and so they never taken off. I mean, the guys on death row have them welded on. And you do start having problems with your knees, but you also wear like a strap on your shins, just below your knees, and it's got a hook like this, like that kind of thing. And then the ring from the chain fits on like that. So your chains are actually, you can walk, but you can't run. But we used to play sport with them. We could run a little bit. I mean, not fast, but you could move around with them because they're quite long. But definitely damaged my knees for a while, and also my back. So, I mean, I have endless problems with my back. Even now, it's always slipping out, but I just managed to push it back in, all the years on concrete floors. But yeah, so even when I was first caught and taken to Bombard, the chains, it's got this psychological thing about it that you're too focused on trying to adapt to this new way of walking, this new way of living, rather than thinking about your prison sentence. So it's a crazy thing. It really messes with your mind. But I wore those for 6 months in solitary, and for the first 3-4 months when I was arrested and brought to Bombard prison, and then they were removed. And it's weird, when they're removed, you feel so light, like you could fly. So yeah.
Another question from a subscriber. I thought this was a good one. How did you see your life turning out if you got past security at the airport that day? You got the drugs, you got them through security all those years ago. How do you think your life would have turned out back then?
Yeah, that's a good question, So I've often thought about that if I had gotten away with it, and brought the drugs. The drugs were going to New York. So somebody also actually asked in one of the questions, are there heroin users in South Africa? So there aren't. And I mean, they're a very small percentage. In my time, I tried chasing the dragon, but there are not many. And the drugs were going to New York. So the thing is, if I would have got through, I don't think I would have lived much longer. I mean, I would have used all the money that I made. I would have probably blown it on drugs. And who knows, I would have carried on down that path of self destruction. And yeah, I don't think I would have survived much longer. So it was a blessing in disguise that I was caught. So somebody actually said that I was asking to ask God to help me to get through, which is what I said and which is in my book. And that God answered my prayers and He stopped me from getting through. So He actually saved my life. And that is so true. So and I live with this gratitude, and I'm like, the Thai prison saved my life. So I wouldn't be around today. No, definitely not.
Did you ever meet anyone in prison that you thought was completely innocent, and what was their story?
It's difficult for me to recall any specific case, but one that comes to mind was this. Anyway, this Thai family. Um, they had been set up. The drugs weren't theirs, and they locked up the father, the two brothers, and the mother. So they were found guilty by association and got life sentences. But I also mentioned in my last interview, I think, that I never really used to discuss people's cases with them. It was just something I didn't do. I had just so much going on in my own life and rebuilding rediscovering who I was, playing sport, doing exercise, doing my art. But I would say about 30% of the entire population were either innocent or they were found guilty by association. So Thailand's very strict with that. So if you're in a restaurant and I'm sitting with you and you and I are doing a drug deal, and maybe right next to us there's another table or something, they might lock up everybody within a 10 feet vicinity, and then slowly you would get out or you would go down for the crime. So, I mean, there were these Israeli guys. I know they were innocent. He became a very good friend of mine. He was a Russian Israeli, and they had a guest house in Thailand. But the Israeli government was after them. They'd been dealing drugs there, but they came to Thailand to change their lives. And I think there were three of them, and who were friends, and they had nothing on them. And they were arrested, charged, and one was on death row. The other two got life sentences. So yeah, there were those guys, and there were others. So the thing is, and as somebody also said in some of the comments, is you don't break the law in Thailand. So I mean, they are extremely harsh and strict on even if you suspected. So yeah, there were quite a few people.
Who was the most feared person you met?
So I think the most feared person was what was his name? I met this guy, besides the general. I think the general was the most feared, but there was another guy in Lajal prison. Excuse me. He was like a paid assassin. That's what he did when he was in the free world. He had killed two high-profile politicians. At that time, these guys were trying to pass a law against gambling. And again, he worked for some generals, and they caught him eventually. They came with helicopters, and it was a big story. I remember seeing it on the news as well. They caught him in the mountains somewhere, and when I first got to Lajal, and I was thrown into solitary there, this was in 2011, after I'd been extracted from Bangkwan, taken to Khao Bin. Then from Khao Bin, I was moved there, where I was thrown into solitary. And one of the guys who, my first day there, I had a little bit of a problem with him. And he had told this guy that I was getting clever. And then he came to me and he approached me in the cell. He came into this solitary confinement section, and he said to him, like, kun mi panha, do you have a problem? I said, po memi alai, no problem. And then he mentioned about this guy, and he put his hand behind my back, and I could see in his eyes, you can see these guys who are murderers, they've got this death stare. So I just, I've just arrived here, and already I'm getting a problem. I've always said that trouble follows me, and the Chinese have this philosophy that you mustn't trouble unless trouble troubles you. But it seemed to follow me wherever I went. But I just apologized. I said, Katot, for me, I don't have a problem. Anyway, he just said to me, this is Lajal, it's not Bangkwan. And Ni Antalai, he is dangerous. So he was like quite a scary guy. He was a lot smaller than me, full of tattoos from his what's the name down. But also then over the days coming, he used to, the one day, they were sparring in the corner, and I went to look at what was going on. So he asked me if I box and that. And I said, yeah, I can. Anyway, we started sparring, and I really took it easy on him because, I had done 3 different styles of martial arts. I got a bit of Thai boxing at Lajal. So after that, we became like best friends, and we'd spar every day. We'd walk, we'd talk. And eventually I asked him his story. He told me his story. I wrote about it in my book. So very honorable guy. I must say I really liked him, although he was scary, but honorable. So he was probably the second guy. Otherwise, it's prison. You're a tiger amongst tigers. Everybody's dangerous.
Did you find that the Thai guys were a little bit standoffish with you being a foreigner at the start, and then they warmed up to you, or what? How did you feel about the relationship with other Thai prisoners?
A lot of the foreigners, we don't have the patience like Thais have. Like Thais, they're very humble in a way, and they have a lot of patience. And whereas we foreigners, if we want something, we want it now. And, a lot of us didn't understand the culture, like you touch them on the head or something, or you step over them. So they didn't warm to foreigners. But the same as the authority, they were accommodating. But the Thais generally didn't like most of the foreigners. You had to earn their respect. And the only way you could earn their respect was to give respect. So I started to embrace the Thai culture and learning about it. And then you must remember, I was also involved in the football teams. We used to have football tournaments. And one of the questions that were asked by somebody, they said, like, was there ever moments where you could enjoy some of your days in a Thai prison, or was it all grim and stressful? So sport was a huge part of not only of self-rehabilitation, but also to relieve the stress. So we had inter-building competitions, we had competitions in the building. So that was more on the lighter side of things. We would play sport, we would organize our own competitions. The Thais love soccer. And I was a great footballer, and I used to sponsor footballs. I used to buy jerseys for the guys. So I became like one of them. And also, as I mentioned in the other one, that I was a human rights activist. So I was fighting for better conditions, not only for foreigners, but for everyone. And the Thais really respected that, because none of them would dare to petition the authorities. So, it took me 10 years to get telephones into the prison. They tried to stop the parcels. I managed not to stop the parcels. I got satellite TV into the prison. To an extent, I alleviated the overcrowding. And I was petitioning a lot that this is how actually I became, and also to be honorable in my ways. I never ever owed anybody money. I did gamble. We gambled quite a little bit a lot on the football. We used to play backgammon for money. So if you're dishonorable, you're exposed very quickly. And then you become an outcast. People won't have time for you. Nobody's going to help you with anything. And life can become dangerous. So there were times that foreigners got stabbed or got a hiding or smacked in that by the Thais, but I also ran the gym. So as I said in my first interview, I was a bit of a kaya myself, but also from giving respect, and treating each other with honor, respect, and as equals. A lot of the foreigners used to like snub the other Thais, and those guys had problems, because I also realized that the majority of the prisoners were Thais, so you they were suffering more than the foreigners because some of them had no support whatsoever. Families had abandoned them, their wives had left them. Our families were sending us money, we were getting parcels. And one of the things that I learned from the Thai culture was to share, because when these guys eat, everybody brings their portion and lays it out, and everybody clubs in and puts their food together. So there was this side to the Thais that taught me so much. And eventually I became more of a Thai than a foreigner. And they embraced me.
How about your level of Thai language then over the years?
So the thing was, initially, I don't want to learn the language. I'm in a foreign country. I don't understand the culture, can't speak the language. And I thought, whatever I'm going to do, I'm not going to try to learn this. I actually tried to learn Chinese, and then I took French classes. One of the guys tried to teach me French, but I didn't want to learn Thai. And then because I was put into this position of power, being the room chief in charge of the foreigners, I was constantly negotiating with the authority, either for our cell or for the gym or for sport or everything. So initially I learned things off by heart. Like I'd go into the building chief's office and I'd learned what I wanted to say, and then he'd have this whole conversation with me and I'd be nodding my head like I didn't even know what he was talking about. But as long as he understood what I wanted. But it wasn't great. I learned enough Thai to get by. Even today, sometimes I've been for a Thai massage and I'll speak to them in Thai. They're actually quite blown away how good my Thai is. But it's a different Thai. It's more of like a prison slang kind of Thai. Like I was speaking Thai, but when I'd watch like the news and I'd listen to the Thais talking, I maybe understood 2-3 words, So, but I could get by, and that was the most important thing for me, So I spoke in the end, and I actually wish I would have learned it more and learned how to write and learned about the vowels. It's a difficult language. If you think about like the word cow, cow, it can be rice, cow can be white. It's got so many different meanings, and it just depends on the tone. But I'm sorry I actually didn't learn it well. But I'm banned from going back to Thailand, so it's a language I would never use. It was like when I studied Latin at school.
That was another question. You just answered it there. So you're banned for life.
No, I'm not allowed back. But I don't think I'd want to go back, for the simple reason that also with my book, I've exposed a lot of the corruption and spoken about the prison system and all that. So if I had the option when I walked out of prison to stay there, I would have liked that, and I might have stayed there. Excuse me.
So it's interesting. So did they tell you like officially that you have a lifetime ban?
Yeah, you're not allowed back. Yeah, no, because I know this because while I was there were 2 South African guys. They were caught with a ridiculous amount of heroin, like not even 2 grams, and they did 10 years. And then they tried to come back. They started this missionary. It was this guy, William Bosch and Sean, very nice guys. They were dancers. He was a choreographer. I actually met a lady who used to dance with him in Asia, and they'd been in Thailand around that time, just before they got arrested. Anyway, they were arrested. They did 10, 11 years. Then they got a king pardon. They were released. They went to China. They started this missionary there. And they wrote to us and wrote to some of the people who used to visit us, like my Thai girlfriend, that they were coming in. Anyway, they were stopped at the airport. They weren't allowed entry, and they had to leave. They wouldn't allow them in. So it's true. We banned for life.
You mentioned there you had a Thai girlfriend in prison.
Yeah, so somebody asked that question. When did she come into the picture and all that? So I met her, I think it was 1998. So I'd been in prison for 4 years, and I don't want to mention her name, but in my book I called her Jai, and she was friendly with an Australian girl, and they had started a a movement, like a charity thing, called One Life at a Time. So basically, what they were doing was visiting American prisoners, and they had companies that were sponsoring. Like one of the companies were giving Philadelphia cheese, and they would arrive with like whole wheat bread and some other stuff. It was very nice, and all the American guys would get that. You know, one of the American guys, his name was Eric. He was a sound engineer. He had a heroin problem, and he was trying to stop. He didn't have money, so I kind of took him under my wing, helped him to stop, fed him and everything. So he said to me, look, as my gratitude, you know, I want you, I've spoken to this girl, Jai. She visits us. And I said, yeah, no. He says, would you like her to visit you? And, you know, she can like be a go-between between you and your family. So initially I said, not really, you know, I mean, I was so busy with my art. Visits were always a distraction. So I thought, why not? Okay, I'll meet her, you know. So, and she turned out to be, you know, like a lifeline between me and my family. So I met her. Initially, it was quite difficult. Her English was good. And she started seeing me on a fortnight basis. And she would email my family. And then she started visiting me then every week, and then eventually we developed a relationship. I used to write to her, and she landed up being my girlfriend for about 8 years, and helped me with my finances. And there was another question somebody said, ended up paying 2,000 baht. How did that work? Did I have a pile of notes in my cell and everything? So just to go on to this money situation, because money was illegal in the prisons. But when I was thrown out of Bombard, I remember I hid $20 inside the sports bag that I had. So that was given back to me. So when I got to Lajal, I had a little bit of money, enough to buy a bed and to get a meal. And I realized then that she says, you can't be without money. So when I was finally sentenced in Lajal and transferred to Bombard, uh, we rolled up the money. It was about 7,000 baht, and we made like a bullet with insulation tape. And I inserted that in my rectum the night before I was leaving. And then I also took like a flask. I opened it, I broke it open, I put 8,000 baht in there, and then I stuck it with super glue, and that I put in my luggage, and everything got through. So the first night when I arrived, I was thrown into the cell. I hadn't eaten or anything, a meal I missed and everything. And then I went to the toilet and I removed this bullet and I opened it, cleaned it, took out the notes. And in the corridor, they were selling food. And I said, yeah, please, I want to order. So they said, have you got money? I said, yeah, I have, you know. So I always made sure I had money. So now when I left, and also we had money in our coffee shop account. So you were allowed a budget of 200 Rand a day to order fresh food from the grocery store outside. But the way I got my money in, I hope they're still not using the same system, but I don't think this will change anything. I managed to smuggle in an ATM card. So now what happened was my family used to go to Pretoria at Foreign Affairs and deposit my monthly allowance. Foreign Affairs in South Africa would transwire the money to the embassy in Bangkok. The embassy in Bangkok would deposit the money in my Thai girlfriend's account, in Jai's account. She would then transfer the money into the account she opened in my name, which I had the ATM card for, and I would give it to one of the guards. So you'd establish a relationship with certain guards, and they would then go out at night when they left and go to the ATM machine, draw what you wanted, and take 5%. So I had special envelopes I had made with all my letters in, and then there was a secret compartment that I used to stick down, and I kept my money in there, and it was never found. When I went to solitary search, they never found my money. When I was transferred from to Calbin and Calbin to Lajal, I had my money. So when I was released, I had a few thousand baht on me. So when I was taken to the drug suppression unit, they didn't want to take me to IDC because they were waiting for a bribe. And that's to answer this guy's question. That's how I had the money to pay. But also my girlfriend came there, and that she gave me the BlackBerry and slipped it to me in the police cell. I mean, I wasn't worried about anything there. I was a free man. You could I mean, they were just holding me there for fun, to make my life difficult. And then I said to them, well, how much do you want? I've got 2,000. And they said, that's fine. And then next thing I knew, I was in a police car taken to IDC.
How did the relationship end with your Thai girlfriend?
It was very sad. So what happened was there was this guy who was in for murder, a foreigner. I'm not going to mention the country he came from or whatever. Him and I, we used to see each other in the visit room. We weren't in the same building, and we got chatting, hell of a nice guy. And he knew about my girlfriend and that she was helping me and being a contact between my family. So he came to me the one day and he said, listen, would you mind asking your girlfriend to help me? I've got a property here which I want to sell, and obviously I would pay her if she could help me find a lawyer, this and that and the next. So, and he asked me, do I trust her? I said, yeah, she's 100% honest. I said, you know what? I'll get her to visit you. I don't want to be involved. I don't want to be the go-between. Whatever you guys do is between you. Anyway, she started visiting him and started helping him, and I don't know, somewhere along the line, they fell in love. so I started noticing a change in her when she used to come visit me. She was like glowing and she had new clothes and she was like a different person. But what I said to this guy, I said to him that he used to come to me and say, oh, your girlfriend's so nice and she's beautiful and she's so helpful. So I looked at him once. So I said, yeah, okay, cool, man. So I said, look, when I go, you can maybe take over because I'm not going to take her back to South Africa with me. Anyway, he went and told her what I had said. And they then fell in love and they got married like a couple months down the line. But, the one day what happened was she was there dressed very nice and he was at the embassy visit. And I said, oh, are you seeing what's her name today? She said, no, I'm leaving. I'm not seeing him today. I'm going to see him tomorrow or something. Anyway, so I left and she left. So I walked out and then I came back and there they were talking to each other. So I had a bit of a freak out. I started screaming and shouting and threatened to stab him. And anyway, so eventually what happened was they wouldn't allow him to come because I caused a big scene and the guards knew what was going on. So he wasn't allowed to come into the foreign visit room in case I would stab him. So he used to see her in the Thai visit room. We had this big argument. She never came to visit me again. She sorted out all my affairs. And a few months down the line, they got married in the prison. I mean, how's that for you?
Are they still married?
Yeah. So he got out a few years after me. I believe she immigrated to Europe where he lives. And yeah, I believe they might be together. Yeah. So happily ever after. But
Well,
I was quite devastated at the time because I didn't actually realize how emotionally dependent I'd come on her. But you know what? When you can't express your feelings physically for somebody, it's your relationship evolves more into a friendship, So I was sad, but I mean, there was no future, and I kept on telling her, like if you meet somebody, marry them. Don't wait on me. I don't even know when I'm going to get out of here. I didn't mean marry my friend,
How about ladyboys? Are ladyboys put into the general population?
Yeah, no, they were. And the thing is that, like the nice ladyboys, the minute they arrive, they like taken up. One of the Kayais will marry them. They have this whole ceremony. And we had one in our cell, and actually used to freak me out because they used to go into the toilet and they'd spend like half an hour in there putting makeup and perfume, and it used to stink. And they would build like a tent in the corner of the cell, like out of sheets, and they would sleep under there, the two of them. I also saw a lady boy take a meat cleaver and chop the husband, like nearly took his arm off. They were. I always thought ladyboys are a little bit unstable. Most of them are there for murder, so you don't really want to get involved with them. So there is an incident in the book that I've written about where I had an encounter with a ladyboy when I was at IDC. So I don't want to go into too much depth, but yeah, so I mean, this guy, she was beautiful. I mean, you wouldn't, you couldn't tell, with some of them, so yeah, they performed quite an important function. But as you would know, it's very much part of the Thai culture, and it's quite a prestigious thing if you're in prison to have a ladyboy as a wife. So yeah, they are in the general population, and you could pay them for certain services, but I never indulged myself, but and kind of stayed away from them because they're very unstable.
How about HIV in prison?
Sorry.
HIV.
Yeah, HIV was quite rampant. There were guys who were on medication. But as you know, there was retroviral drugs or whatever they were called, and it was controlled. But there were guys who were dying from HIV. Um, Tuberculosis was much more rampant, and guys were also dying from tuberculosis. But there were a lot of guys, even foreigners, who came in with me who eventually became, I don't want to say gay, but bisexual, So
How was your first month out of prison? And did it just feel incredible to be free again?
yeah, so it was quite overwhelming, especially when I like arrived at the airport. But also it was scary, because in a way I I missed prison, So well, maybe not prison as such, but certain elements, because I missed like the comradeship, the structure, and it became my comfort zone. So it was very difficult in the beginning. I mean, I couldn't sleep on a bed. My sister used to come into the room in the morning. She'd find me on the carpet, sleeping on the floor. So anything, and I couldn't sit on a toilet seat because I was so used to squatting. So I used to still have to stand on the toilet, but I just couldn't sit. And there was a lot of aggression in me, So uh, and I also missed the danger element. So in the beginning, I mean, I had problems with my family, and in prison, I was somebody, and you come out into this world and you don't really know who you are or how you're going to fit in, or are you ever going to fit in, So also, like with my art, I started going around to galleries and nobody wanted to touch me because I think because I was an ex-convict. I wasn't sure if my art wasn't symbolic of the times. And there was also this politically correct thing to do to help Black emerging artists. So life was very difficult. I mean, I had huge problems with my family. They were in a dark place. We didn't have money for food. I went to I used to go to two charities and stand in a queue to get food parcels. So it was very hard, And then also I had nightmares. I still sometimes have these nightmares. So, like one of the questions were, am I over it completely or do I still deal with it? I mean, I still have dreams about being in prison. And then it's like, I see some of the guys I was with and I'm like, hey, are you back? And yeah, he's back. And geez, how long are you in for now? And yeah, and then I'd say, yeah, I've done 20 years, it really plays with your mind. And I think some psychological scars from prison never really heal. And sometimes something can trigger my aggression, So somebody might say something to me in a joking manner, but I take it as like a disrespect. So I'm still that prison mentality never really leaves you, but I am a lot more chilled, and I don't just attack either. I mean, I had huge problems with my family. We were having arguments. It was financial problems. Um, I had a problem with my brother-in-law. He like put his finger in my face, and we had an argument. And I attacked him, and then he pulled a gun on me. He wanted to shoot me. My sister wanted to call the police. So there was havoc, So um, I blame myself for it, and like I was also trying to impose my will on my family, and they'd keep saying to me, Sean, this is the free world. You're not in prison now, and we're not prisoners here. We don't need to answer to you. This is how we live. You got to fit in with us, not us with you, So it was extremely difficult. I mean,
Did you adapt over time then?
sorry.
Did you adapt over time?
Yeah, so it took a while. I would say the first 4 or 5 years were extremely difficult, and I had some very supportive friends, who were helping me. I went to see a therapist. That didn't work. She was trying to dig into my childhood, and so the thing is that you come out of prison, you're just thrown into a family environment after 18 years and being in one of the most violent prisons in the world. You can't expect to just fit in or adjust. So I think one of the main things also that helped me, that was cathartic, was writing my book, because I, anyways, I wanted to talk a little bit about the book, because that was an important process of me reintegrating back into society, and that was my primary purpose when I came out. So after 2 months, I started writing the book. And while I was in prison, I used to dream about, sitting in a coffee shop and just watching life going by, and just that freedom of seeing kids, people, and I couldn't actually focus at my sister's house. We were having all these problems, and she had these two little dogs, and I'm not a pet person, and they used to come on my bed, and it used to freak me out. So every day I was dropped off at a coffee shop, and I wrote Dragons and Butterflies. I literally wrote it by hand, and it was in coffee shops around Johannesburg. And that also helped me to deal with this problem of having this prison mindset. And I was meeting a lot of people, and that's also been a huge blessing. All the friends that have filtered through and who were there for me, and then I also started painting and promoting my art. So, and initially, the first week that I was out, I mean, I was swamped by the media. I was doing one interview after the other, radio, television. I mean, I literally hit the ground running. And next thing I know, I'm doing motivational talks. I'm invited to religious institutions, to corporate business, and I'm sharing my story. And, while I'm sharing it, I'm getting emotional. I'm actually breaking down and crying, because a lot of the emotions are suppressed in prison. When you start talking about it, and you actually reliving it in your mind, and that also helped a lot. So, the funny thing is, all my life, I mean, growing up in an orphanage, then being in the army, so I've always been kind of institutionalized, but I've never really had anything. And yet I've had everything. So I'm kind of blessed in that way, that I've always been content with what I've got. I mean, obviously I like nice things. I've got a thing about sneakers. So I've got dozens of sneakers, and my jeans. I mean, I wear short jeans. I'm very down to earth. So it doesn't take much to please me. So I'm very content, and I'm much more at peace. I'm not that aggressive as I used to be. But I can sometimes feel when there's a confrontation that my blood pressure comes up, and then I just try to breathe and think rationally, and just not let my ego get the better of me, because I've never had to prove anything to anyone, especially in a physical confrontation. But yeah, the adjusting process isn't easy. And I also mentioned before, we were part of that process where ex-cons publicly apologized to, I still can't remember what it's called, to your victims. We also got a mediator in between my sister and I. So that all helped. And then I started to also understand that, in fact, I put them through hell, which I knew, but I didn't understand to what extent I destroyed their lives. And their financial problems were part of the problem from me, because they used to send me money, buy me parcels and all this. So yeah, so once I started to understand the damage I'd caused, and in fact how much I owed them, we started getting on much better. So I must say my relationship with my sister today is very good. They've actually just immigrated to the UK, so I miss her a lot. But it's a process, and I can relate to why the rate of recidivism is so high. People who commit capital crimes, they come out of prison after 20 years. And I've always said society is as unforgiving as a concrete floor, because it's hard for people to give an ex-con a job or to trust them. So what do? we resort to going back to crime. I mean, I wanted to commit a crime when I came out in that first year. I'm thinking, I just, I don't fit in here. Nobody really understands me. Nobody knows what I've been through. I'd rather be back in prison. And maybe I must commit a crime and just go back there because that was my life. So it was difficult, I mean, it was touch and go, and I used to go walking the streets at night so I could maybe get into a fight or I could feel that danger element. I mean, I'm getting very emotional now talking about it because I'm still not okay.
Well, I mean, Shani, it's 18 years in a Thai prison. I mean, what you've gone through is just, it's unimaginable. I mean, I just can't comprehend it. And people watching this probably won't be able to comprehend it. You've seen terrible things and you've experienced terrible things, but you've come out the other end, which is very admirable, and I think people will be able to see that. We can hear it in your voice as well. It's a real test of human character. I mean, what you've done
Yeah.
is it's just unheard of.
Yeah, no, and some people are just so judgmental, they just, okay, well, he did this drug thing and he deserves to die, he should have been executed. But I'm a firm believer of second chances, but they're not afforded to you. I think you need to earn it, and what I've tried to do is bring value to the world and to make a difference to others because also I mentioned this in my previous interview because we all have a story and we can learn from each other's experiences. It gives us a different perspective on our own lives. Like for me, one of my biggest lessons in prison was to appreciate the simple things. I mean, hot water. Okay, like yeah, in South Africa now we have water shortages, we have power outages, so it doesn't actually bother me. I can work my life around that, even with COVID and lockdown and all that. People asking me, so how are you managing with lockdown? And I'd say, well, it's actually nothing. I mean, I'm in a prison here on lockdown, but I've got my bed. It's luxurious. I've got my TV. I can go out. I'm not that restricted. So I don't let the small stuff worry me. So there are just so many lessons and I did get a second chance. 20 years drug free. My book's been introduced into school libraries. I know my story has made a huge difference. So for people to judge and to be so quick to say, well, he did this and this, and one of the guys said something about that I relate my story as if I'm blameless and innocent, and he says he isn't. It was the kind of setup where there is no guilt on the side of the offender. Well, I'm sorry, yes, I didn't have guilt because I was a drug dealer and I was a drug addict. But, as a drug dealer, I always justified selling drugs to people that if they didn't get it from me, they would get it from somebody else. But afterwards, I've realized that that's a coward's way of looking at it because I didn't give a shit about the other people. As long as I got my money and I could use my drugs, I didn't care, which was wrong. So, I mean, in fact, I'm the first to admit that I deserved what I got because I was the deliverer of death. I was destroying people's lives and destroying my own life in the process. So, yes, there is remorse. And looking back afterwards, during the time, you're not thinking rationally. Drugs impair your judgment. You don't care. We all live to get high. Drug addicts and drug dealers, we master manipulators. So we don't actually give a shit. And I didn't. But over time, I am remorseful for everything I did. And I believe everybody deserves a second chance, But again, you got to earn it, And also, I had to get back my own self-worth because as a drug addict, we have no self-worth because we're taking in all this poison, we're destroying ourselves, we're destroying other lives. And it was also important for me to get the respect of my family back, So, yeah, what a journey.
Shani, there's another question here from a subscriber, and it's about I'll read it out. It says, my girlfriend's oldest brother was sentenced to 24 years for drug smuggling. He has currently served 8 years in Thailand. What actual sentence is he likely to serve? Will he serve the whole 24 years or will it be reduced?
So if I think about like the story with Ellie Cohen, who's killed his wife and chopped her up into pieces. He had a 25-year sentence. He served 9 years. This guy, but it's a drug offense. So the problem with drug offense is they get less of a reduction, like when there's an amnesty, if the king's celebrating it. So, but again, depending on his behavior and his class. So I can't see him doing more than 12 years, So if his behavior is excellent and every amnesty that comes up, he benefits. So if he's on 8 now and he's done 24, that leaves him with 16. So if you do like coming up in December, well, with that, I don't think they'll be celebrating King Bhumibol's birthday because that was on the 5th of December. So it would be interesting to know when it's the prince's birthday because, or the queen, I mean the king, today's king. So they would give maybe a 1/6 reduction. So you can do the mathematics and see still how many amnesties he must benefit from. But I can't see him doing more than 12. He might be lucky and there might be a big amnesty coming out. Who knows, So he won't do the full sentence.
Okay. Shani, so if people out there want to buy your art or want to buy your book, how can they do that?
So the thing is, my book is available in an ebook on Amazon. So they can download it. But like I said to you before, I'm also happy to pass my book on in a PDF form, which I did to quite a few people. So it's very difficult to get the actual book itself because what I've been doing is going to secondhand bookstores and trying to buy my book back. But at some stage, I'm hoping, if the finances permit, maybe to self-publish again. It's quite expensive, So, I mean, you're looking at now self-publishing, it's like 300 Rand a book. Initially, my book was selling for like 250 Rand. So now it's more to publish it yourself. Then how much do you sell it for? And then there's a minimum quantity of 100 or something. So it's a ridiculous amount, So hopefully at some stage, I mean, I have approached other publishers, but they don't like to republish a book that was published 6, 7, 8 years ago. But I'm also hoping this year still to write my second book, which is also extremely interesting, the whole adjusting process and a lot of the stuff that we've spoken about. And maybe there'll be some interest then to republish the first book. But so that's the only way, So I'm constantly trying to buy books because I lend them to people to read, and then I collect it afterwards and pass it on because there's still a huge interest, in reading the story. I don't know if there was anything else.
What about your art? How can they get your art?
So, I mean, I'm in the process of starting a website. And because my art is quite expensive, we're also going to be selling like limited prints of works. So that should be going up in the next month or two. We're busy working out sizes, busy loading the website. Or otherwise, just to contact me direct on Facebook, or I see last time you put my email up there. If somebody wanted to see some art, I can show them what's available. A guy actually, I forgot to mention, he saw your program and he contacted me from Australia and he wanted me to do something for his daughter in my funky colors. His daughter had passed away. I didn't ask him what had happened, but he wants me to do something special for her. So just contact me, Google my name and email.
I'll put your details. I'll put your email down below. I'll pin it down below.
Okay, that will be great. Thank you. So,
no worries.
So again, thanks for an interesting interview. Are there any last minute questions or anything?
I think we've covered it all. I mean, look, what I'll say is if anyone else has questions, put them down below in the comment section, and then Shani, you can just answer a couple of them if you can.
I'm going to go back and answer a lot of the other questions, and just because I think it's important that if people take the time to comment or to ask, I'll answer.
Yeah, that's cool. That's fair enough. I'm sure we'll get loads of comments on this one.
There was somebody who didn't like my hairstyle. I mean, I think it's great. This is like a Viking hairstyle,
Man,
So
just do you. Who cares, man? Just you're happy with it.
you know what was so funny? The other 2 days ago, it's a shame it wasn't so funny, but anyway, a friend of mine's brother had passed away, and I went to the to prayers, and there were two youngsters there. They must have been about 17, 18. So they said to me, "How come you've got long hair? Because nobody today has long hair." So I said, "Yeah, I got stuck in the 90s, you know, so I'm still living in those days. But I did have a trim, if that makes a difference. And I got new glasses, but they're still reflecting."
Look,
But
one
yeah,
thing I know
just,
about this internet game is you can never please everybody. There's always, people
yeah,
that are going to comment and disagree and say
no,
different things. You just have to take
I,
it with a pinch of salt.
no, I do. I promise you. Let me tell you something. There've been conflicting opinions about my story, about my freedom, and a lot of these. I call them keyboard warriors. I had people when I came out said I should have been executed. Everything. I contacted these people all individually and said, then I was still very aggressive. Like, okay, you come say that to my face. You got no idea who I am. You're judging me. You don't know what I've been through, what I'm doing with my life now. So yeah, so I understand that. So yeah, it doesn't bother me.
Shani, thanks for doing the both episodes. I really appreciate it and sharing your time
Yeah,
and effort and just the whole experience. It's like as we've seen the response in the first video, it's just been spectacular. I'm sure people are going to enjoy this one. And
yeah.
just thanks again for doing it.
All the
Enjoy the
best.
rest
Thank
of
you.
your day. Hop
Thank
hop
you.
gun,
You
Matt Cap.
too. Sawadee Krap.
What do you got?